Could you start by telling us a little bit about what you do and who you do it for?
Sure, I'm the CEO of Guardian Adventures, and we do in-person, live, interactive educational adventures for all ages now. And we provide on-site services. We also do STEM camps that kids come to from all over the world. And we also provide consulting for large corporations like Royal Caribbean, the parent company for the Princeton Review, and now Microsoft as well.
Okay, so that's changed things a little bit for you at the moment.
Yes, it's been exciting. We have brought everything online. So we literally, all of our services are now online using Google Classroom and Zoom. We were able to pivot very quickly because we expected, as soon as we heard news about this, we started planning on it. We started testing and training everybody. And then when we decided to shut down, we literally had the very next day of classes online, and we had our members all logged in, and we had already developed a training program for our instructors in utilizing the systems. And now I think we're at probably 90% of our clients online now with us. And so kids are engaged, and adults as well are engaged in front of their screen, but they're holding on to their swords if it's a sword-based adventure. And we have an online spring break adventure, full-day adventures coming up. We're homebound, we call them homebound heroes, where the kids are stuck home, and it's spring break, there's no school. So we're doing from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. an extended day as well. We're doing full-day adventures that get the kids up and out of their seat, running outside with the phone to take pictures of stuff for a scavenger hunt, and coming back in and talking. It's all in video conference, so they can see all the other kids and they can see our instructors. So we've really translated it very well to the online environment.
Awesome. All right. So here's the thing. We're trying to look at how people overcome adversity, how we've done it before. I think you're adjusting amazingly well anyway now. So that's already an excellent example of kind of figuring out what's going on, adjusting accordingly, and filling a need, especially at the moment. Everybody with their kids at home get a bit of their energy out and so on. But can you tell me a little bit about a time that you faced adversity before, and maybe how that's made you more resilient and adaptable now?
We opened the doors to our first full-time facility 3 days before 9/11. So it was like, grand opening, we're all set. And so yeah, it was huge. I was terrified, and I didn't know what to do, and I just really buckled down and started calling people, cold calling in some instances. We tried all kinds of really interesting, creative, and this is before I had a big staff. I think I had 2 employees. Now I have 20. And so it was a lot of bootstrapping. It was a lot of running around and just trying to get people to pay attention to us because they were so focused on what had happened with 9/11. And the advantage, though, is that the biggest pivot we did at that time, which really not only saved my company, but kind of really formed what it is today. So at that time, it was mostly a martial arts and fencing facility. And there's a little bit of background story here. So when my kids were younger, both my daughters, instead of reading them a bedtime story, I would sometimes make up a story where they were the heroes in the story, and I would use their middle names as their hero names, and I would make up the story, and then I'd stop and I'd say, okay, so what do you do? And then they'd tell me, and then I'd make up the next part of the story. And sometimes I'd even give them a little bit of money to go to the store and buy a prop, which they had to work into the story, or I would work into the story, and they loved that. And what I realized as a parent was that this was a great way for me to assess where my kids were in their learning and in their decision making. I put them into really interesting situations, and I was truly curious. How are they going to handle this? And so I learned a lot about them and what they think and how they think by doing this. And I realized, because they loved these so much, they found them so engaging, and I realized, I bet you other parents would be into this, and other kids would be into this. So I hired some teachers who were into LARPing, live action role playing, and I brought them in. I said, here's what I want to do. I want to do this activity, which up until that point had just been reserved for adults. I don't want to make it for kids. But here's the thing is, I don't want them learning a fake language in order to cast a spell. I want them to learn Latin. I want them to learn physics in order to be a wizard. I want them to learn biology in order to be a healer. I want them to learn chemistry to be able to be a potion maker. So, because I was, selfishly thinking I want my own kids in this type of class, right? And so we made these little adventures, we call them Wizards and Warriors. And within a year, they just blew the roof off my company in popularity. So much so that within just a few years, probably 4 or 5 years, I was no longer doing martial arts. Our fencing program had shrunk down. It's still part of our program because a lot of our clients like to learn sword fighting. But it became the primary driver of my company. Today, that's what we're renowned for. We're a story-based educational company, and we use stories to educate. So, and that came out of my desperation to do something different from 9/11. I realized we have to differentiate ourselves. We have to do something so out there. And for a lot of parents, the idea of using imagination like that, getting their kids to use their imagination to see where they were in their development and to help them. Here's another thing, especially for teenagers, because we have a really robust teen program that does the same thing. The teens are playing heroes in this live adventure where it's like a video game, but without a computer. So you are dressed up in costumes, you're playing a character, you have a character name, you have a backstory. And what teens are doing is they're using this as a way to experiment with their own identity and to try to be someone who they don't dare be at school or among their friends in a safe environment, because if it doesn't go over well, they can always go, well, that's my character. My character did that, not me, right? So so this became a really big program for us, and now we are and now we're a consulting company for large entertainment and education corporations.
So, in a sense, imagination is a great way for handling adversity as well. Even in times like this, I'm guessing it's a really great tool to get the kids out of the whole COVID-19-ness, if you like, and into, let's imagine what things could be kind of thing.
Exactly right. I would add to that, though, I was just talking to a guy who's a PhD candidate today, and he was interviewing me on the phone. He said, how is it that you have responded so quickly and so well to this time of adversity when larger companies are behind the curve? And I said, I have an entire company full of people who are experienced in improv. So it's seriously, all of my teachers, all of my instructors, they have a background in acting and improv. So what we do is we pull around, we always throughout the day, we're playing improv games. We're constantly doing things to think outside the box. And the key thing about improv is that, have you ever tried improv before? It's yes and. Everything that comes at you, you have to work with. You cannot say, no, I don't want to work with that. It's yes and. And so it's an entire mindset, improv is, that drives our company. So when this came rolling down the line at us, and from the resilience of having handled 9/11, leaning on that and going, this isn't my first rodeo. We know how to do this. And it came rolling down the line. I was like, we got this. We just have to think outside the box on that.
Now, I'm going to dig a little deeper with you here.
Sure.
I'm just going to throw this out there, right? You've already handled adversity before when you opened your business.
Yeah.
But you were able to handle that adversity that you had before for a reason.
Yeah.
go further back.
Okay.
What made you the type of person that when faced with that adversity,
Mm.
you weren't just like, you know what, this isn't gonna work. No, you were like, well, this thing I'm doing with my kids in the evening, well, it's really working. They're having fun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get on the phone. I'm gonna cold call, and I'm gonna try something different. I'm gonna keep going till something sticks.
Okay. Okay. So I got 2 points on that. Remind me to tell the one of the keywords is transfer. So let's come back to that afterwards.
What's the keyword? Sorry.
Transfer. And
Transfer.
it's a concept I've been talking about because I lecture at Harvard Graduate School of Education. I'm a guest lecturer. And I've talked about this with a number of Harvard professors, and they're like, you need to write a book on this because I've never heard about this before. So, but I'll come back to that. But the first part, obviously, I think anybody would tell you it's a combination of genetics. Are you wired as a person to persevere? Or, are you the type to go up against adversity and to try to conquer it? Or are you the type of person who plays a more, submissive role? Are you the kind who, and I think this is true of any entrepreneur, they are almost wired to come up against things and persevere. But
is it nature or nurture?
I think it's both. And so there's the nature, the genetic wiring, and then there's the nurture as well. And by the way, nurture doesn't necessarily mean you had an easy life or a good life, because sometimes the people who are most resilient are the people who've been through, excuse my French, they've been through really tough times and they made it through, and they've got this mentality of never say die. Just got to find a way to get around this or through it or over it, but we're going to get through it. So I think it's both, though, because people who have had good, secure lives, like my own children, they have confidence that they're going to get through it, and so that confidence is what gives them the perseverance, and that ability to reach out and ask for help, which is really important. That's what I constantly tell my kids is it's okay to ask for help. I know you feel real vulnerable with it, but that is so utterly important when you are in a situation like this. Don't ever hesitate to ask for help. On the other side, you have your diehard individualist who grew up in environments where they couldn't ask for help, for whatever reason. But they persevered nonetheless. And for them, they're based on experience and confidence that they can make it through because of the hard times they made it through. The one thing I'd say for them, they got to learn how to ask for help, though. Because,
okay, so either way, low levels of neuroticism, but and confidence. But how would someone that's having a rough time, right? Yeah. How do you give them that perspective shift? How do you help them go from I don't have what it takes, or this is not going to be okay, right? Yeah. To this is okay. What in your own life or your own experience made you the type of person, whether it was because you went through hardship and came out on the other side of it, but when we go through hardship, right, we're kind of like, we'll take a few moments of woe is me, that's natural, and then we'll process and we'll decide what to assign to that memory.
Yeah.
We're either going to assign the few days after where we started clawing back up, or we're going to assign the path that it took us on, which might have been a woeful path for weeks or months. And I think, in fact, and that's one of my concerns with what's happening now, is the direction you take after the journey you take when you've assessed the situation will determine how your mind works in the future. Because I think even if I look into my own past, right, and other people that I've interviewed and researched, the one major thing I saw is there's a difference in the mindset coming out of the problem and the attribution to it. Like, yes, I went through it, but now I'm stronger and I survived it. Or the other way, I went through this and my life got terribly worse and it
Yeah.
never got better.
Yeah.
What about you? How do you feel about that?
Sure. So, are you familiar with the book Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck?
I think I've read it. Yes.
Okay. If you've ever done coaching or sports, it's almost always assigned reading. So my husband is a coach for Junior Olympics. It's one of the largest volleyball programs
Okay.
in the country, and he assigns that as required reading for all of his coaches. And a lot of it is about how do we handle failure. And I could talk for an hour about the problem with how our school system handles failure. I mean, we really look at I'll just bore you for a little bit.
Go ahead, go ahead. I'm enjoying it.
So the first part about it is that I always say the only thing worse than an F is a D in school. Do you know why? In an F, I have to take the course again. With a D, I've passed. And what happens is all I do is own the idea that I suck at that subject and I move on. But that is more pervasive and defining for my life later on than taking it again and doing better at it and being able to reshape, as you said, reshape that memory coming down the line. So what I always tell my staff this, and I have to say, I wasn't this way when I was younger, and it was a long journey to get to this point, that if you are not failing, you are not innovating. And we only have innovators here. And it was the fact that we hire innovators is because we were able to pivot so quickly and get online. So you have to be open to failure, and you can't afford to be devastated by it, because if you are, you're not an innovator. I mean, it's like, you know that saying, I can't remember the whole saying about inventing the light bulb, Thomas Edison, you know, he tested up, he said, I didn't fail, I found 10,000 things that didn't work. So, and that is really part of that mindset, that perseverance. And I think part of it too can be making sure you expose yourself to those kinds of stories regularly. Which brings me to transfer. Okay. So, so this concept is that, and I've never read about this. I kind of figured this out, and I was talking to a Harvard professor about it. And he was the one who said, you need to write a book on this. So the idea is that in our life experiences that seem to be drastically unrelated, what we learn over here absolutely can be transferred to what we're learning over here. So I'm going to give you an example. I have a pretty diverse background because I'm a former adrenaline junkie. So I have my motorcycle racing license.
Why former?
Because, that's a long story too. So, and a lot of it has to do with about 4 or 5 years ago, I started volunteering in hospice. And that really changes your perspective on life and death. So, but anyway, do you know anything about riding a motorcycle?
I do. I used
Okay.
to ride off-road though.
Okay. All right. So for Mother's Day, my husband gave me all expense paid to motorcycle racing school, which is a pretty funny comment when you think about it for Mother's Day.
Oh, don't worry. My wife sent me skydiving. So.
There you go. So in motorcycle racing, when you're going around the track and you're hitting a turn, there's what's called an apex. All right. Mm-hmm. And the apex is where you're going to lean into the bike, really, really lean into that turn, look down the track at where you want to go, and your bike goes down there, right? Mm-hmm. The key thing here, and they teach you this in school, always keep your eye on where you're going, no matter what, right? And on the other end of this one wicked turn is the bleachers. And I realized I hit my apex too late on this turn, and I'm going fast. I'm going into the bleachers. And in the back of my head, I remember this instructor saying, if you're gonna crash looking where you should have been. And I could hear his voice, and so I did that. I turned and I looked down the track where I was supposed to be going, and aggressively, and I leaned the bike so aggressively that my knee touched down for the first time. And I nailed it. I nailed that late apex, and I went sailing down the mist coming off the asphalt, probably by like that much. Scared the
Wow.
hell out of me. So, but that was a pivotal moment for me because I realized, you know, and this can be taken, everything can be taken the wrong way, but it really is. If you're going to tackle something, if you're going to do something, keep your eye on it, so especially with the right thing. So in this whole time of this experience right now, I had to face. I'm right now. I'm watching our revenue fall because even though we've transferred everything in, we're not getting new revenue coming in. Just yesterday, I applied for and received unemployment as the CEO. No one else in my company is unemployed right now. I will not lay them off. I will crash this company before I lay off my employees. But I know in my heart we're going to succeed. Or if we fail doing the right thing. So the part of me, the resilient part of me, is going, yeah, we may fail. I'm not saying I'm not going to crash. I'm saying I'm going to crash looking where I should have been. You see what I'm saying? So the mentality is that of go down doing the right thing, no matter what. And so that transfer is taking this idea that applies over here in motorcycle racing, and I took it and I applied it to a philosophy around running a business.
Okay.
You know, and I do fire breathing. That's another one of my hobbies. So I have all these weird eclectic activities that I've done and that I do, and I can probably pull out of each one of them a concept, an instruction that I can apply to running a business.
I'm going to be cheeky here. I'm interviewing you, but I'm going to interject mine.
Go for it.
And I just because I want to see what you think about it, right? And I think it ties into part of what you're saying. One of the concepts that I apply pretty much across everything in my life is positive significance. And that's basically, how can I be relevant to you in a positive way, right? Yeah. There are many people throughout history that have been significant, but in a negative way.
Yeah, that's right.
So we add the positive just as a qualifier. So we're going to try and do some good. Now, with your business, you do a lot of good for kids. You do a lot of good for your team. You seem to be a strong servant leader in a sense, right? You're not just in this for you. In fact, you're like, oh, we're going through hell. Well, let's make sure I'm the first to take the cut.
Yeah.
And then pivot from that. Now, I think also that part of the people that do make it through adversity is because they see a bigger picture than themselves.
Yes.
In what they can do for others, and that kind of keeps them going, right? If you go through hell, but you're like, you know what, this life experience is something I can share, or I've got people depending on me, so there's conscientiousness there, which is also a core in the big five for entrepreneurs based on studies, right? Having other people. And if you go with Maslow's theory, you know, same thing, self-actualization and so on. When we start to give, we start to live.
Yeah.
Realistically. Now, and then I'm looking at like your transfer approach, right? Where you can take a skill that you've learned elsewhere and now apply it to this. And I think of that skill in the same way, but you're also immediately showing one being future focused. So I'm trying to pick up just a few things and kind of throw them in there as, hey, here are some tools that might be able to help you go through adversity the same way Meghan's kind of doing in a way, and pretty impressive. I love your mindset. Like, I'm just like, all right, if everybody had this mindset, this thing, once it's passed, we're fine. Because the other thing that scares me is I've got a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk with, and there are a decent number of them that are generally optimistic, and I'm seeing them go to apathy or denial. And that's a scary place, right? Because that means the economy won't kick back in.
It's inaction. Apathy and denial creates inaction.
Right?
And that's
So either I'm
difficult.
oblivious, this isn't really happening, it's all going to be okay, which, I mean, we have to adapt. That there's going to be a new normal after this. I think what you're doing with your business adjusts to that new normal,
Right.
very, very well, in fact. And so you might have gone on unemployment, but I think your team might have a strong future. So
Yeah, and I think though it's key to look at something I had said before, which is accepting failure ahead of time. I think a key part of that mindset is failure is acceptable. So it's which is really counter to what a lot of books talk about, which is like eye on the prize, nothing else. Which, you know, and it kind of fits in with my idea of always be looking down the track. But still, the concept that I embrace is this could very well fail, but I will determine how it fails, and we will not stop focusing on our mission. We will not compromise that.
better to fail trying than not to try at all. Right?
Yeah, and it's not just trying, but to staying true to yourself. Because I need to be able to go to sleep at night knowing that I was true to myself and to my staff and to all of our clients. So if I fail, I have it makes the picture so much clearer. It doesn't necessarily make it, it's not easier, it's just clear, right? You know your path. You can look at the path that goes right up the mountain. You still got to climb that damn path.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy. But it's so obvious. It's so clear. There's no confusion, and the confusion is what saps people. That's what gets them to stop in their tracks and gets them to doubt themselves. So I think it's just understanding that failure is absolutely possible, and that's okay.
Now, I have to be cheeky because I didn't get to this answer. You snuck away from me somehow. What made you this way?
So it's been a long journey here. I very long. I think the one thing that really helped me as a child was incredibly imaginative. I mean, I lived in my head in a whole world of creatures and possibilities and fantasy worlds. And then through a series of things, like I got into martial arts at a young age. I did that for 25 years. You want to talk about learning perseverance? That's physical perseverance. And so it was a lot of lifetime experiences. Of late, I'm relying heavily upon I'm Buddhist, so I'm relying heavily on my Buddhist practice. I practice meditation and mindfulness for an hour and a half every single morning. And to me, that's really key, because that practice is all about accepting whatever comes at me. It's all about opening up your heart and your mind to whatever comes. I can be open to this. I think also, to go back to my hospice work, sitting with the dying really changes you. I really do believe that every time I've been asked to, because what I do is I do what's called vigil. I sit with people who have no family or anyone to sit with them when they're dying and they don't want to die alone. And I knew I could do this when a long time ago, I think it was like 20 years ago, my 1-year-old goddaughter died just before her first birthday from leukemia. And I was there with the parents. I was in the hospital. And I had watched so many of their family and friends just go away, because losing a baby is like the pinnacle of human fear. You know, any parent, it is their most dire fear. And I was a parent of 2 young kids, and I couldn't tell you why, but I had to be there. I had to. I was drawn to be present with this family through this really hard time, not just because she was my goddaughter. And I wasn't able to figure that out until like 5 or 6 years ago. And when I realized I've had a lot of death in my life. That's just how my family and my history worked out. And I realized that because I can be present with death, I have to. It's when I went to the hospice to learn how to do this, I had that first experience of what a calling is. And really, it was like something way beyond me. and I realized I need to do this. And since then, I've been extremely honored to sit with many dying people and to be present with them through that process and their families. And some of these people I have relationships with for like a half a year. World War II vets who've given me stories that literally they've never told anybody. They've been holding on to these stories their entire lives. And before they die, they need to tell somebody. And I'm this person who comes in with no agenda. I'm there for them. I'm there just to talk with them every week. And I don't judge. And they give me these stories and they share them with me. And that whole process there, to me, really puts failure, the idea of failure, business failure, into a whole different perspective. Because when you sit with the dying and you are seeing life and death at that level, everything else is just not as consequential.
I think as well, about 4 years ago now, my grandfather passed away in my arms, actually, stage 4 cancer. And I think it does. I think it really does give you a different perspective on life. And there's a really, I think, a fine line that can kind of how we react to that, right? In the sense of, does it take us to a dark place where nothing is meaningful?
Right.
Or do we interpret that? And that brings us back to perspective, whether this is a life well lived, there's an existence, and what we can do for each other now and the life we can live now becomes so much more important, right? That there's 2 ways to go from there. And I love that you're honoring their life in a sense by being there.
Yeah.
And
the other thing,
that takes a lot of strength on your part, though, I would imagine, but maybe a certain calm as well out of it.
Yeah, well, I a lot of people, sometimes when I tell people I volunteer in hospice, they say, well, isn't that depressing? And I'm like, no, it's not depressing, because I'm going into this relationship knowing there's an expiration date. So when I meet my patient, I know that I'm going to see them through the dying process. And I have to accept that up front. And so it's my job is to give them all of my attention, and while I'm there with them, whatever I can do to help them be in a place where they can be open and accepting of what they're going through. And, in all of my patients, I've never heard anybody, when I ask them, what are the things that matter the most right now? And without, hands down, they all talk about these things: the people they love, the people who love them, and the regrets. And the regrets are usually around people they've hurt. It's never about the businesses they made, the money they made, the wealth they've accrued, or the cars they own. It's never about that. So when you hear that message over and over again from a variety of people of all ages who are dying, you go, okay, these people see it. They see what it is. What real success is actually the loving connections you have.